Hi, it's Alexis.
And Christian from Tiny House Expedition. And we built our tiny house way back in 2014.
With the help of friends and family, over 9 months of ups and downs and trial and error, it was all worth it in the end.
We built a cozy custom home of our own that led us to an adventure of a lifetime. And now we're working on a shuttle bus conversion.
In our DIY Tiny Home Build Stories series, we hope to inspire and empower you to take on your own build by yourself or with help.
I needed help. I definitely needed help. And after you watch this, visit tinyhousebuild.com for how-tos and building tips. All right, guys, you got this. Let's do it.
I'm Claudia Morris Barclay. I am 37 years old, just by the way, in case you wanted to know. This is a 2017 Ram ProMaster 3500 high top. It's a 159 extended wheelbase. It's silver. Her name is Ro, R-E-A-U-X, just to be fancy. And I started van life in 2019, so it's been just over 2 years. I built this entire van myself with just a handful of hand tools with no experience beforehand. I just decided to design something complicated and jump in. So I bought the van and I had never built anything in my life. I assemble IKEA furniture. I have experience in design, but I've never made a picture frame, let alone furniture. And I got a bunch of hand tools and said, okay, let's hit the road and let's build as we go. I decided to give up my apartment earlier than I probably should have, but I really wanted to hit the road. And so at that point, I decided to build a bed and make sure I had room for the things in my apartment and put things in a storage unit and then hit the road. But even at the time when I started building, I was living in an apartment and it didn't have a driveway, it didn't have a dedicated building space, it was only off street. And so I learned quickly how to do that. So I was building on street corners, in home improvement store parking lots, in random parks. And so that's what I did before I moved out of my apartment. And so once I did that for about a month, I was like, this is what I can do on the road. Cool, got it. And so I hit the road and would go from Home Depot to Lowe's to Public Park to random street corner and build. And that's what made it challenging, is having a space for all the building materials. And you can't do pieces of a project the way that you normally would. You'd say, oh, I'll work on paint today, or I'd work on knobs today. You can't do that. You have to say, okay, am I working on a closet? Build the whole closet, go. And so the challenge is completing projects while you're on the road. And then weather, you're building outside. There's no cover, there's nowhere to keep anything other than inside with you. And so having to overcome that was a big challenge, and really learning how to break down a project into smaller pieces. But when you've never built anything before, you don't always know the order of operations. So you don't realize that, okay, in order to be able to do this, I must do A, B, and C to get to this point. You don't know that. And so it's a lot of stopping and starting, and a lot of starting a build and saying, oh, I needed to do A, B, and C first, and going back and doing those things, and then coming back to this piece and living in a rubble. That's really what it is. You learn to play Tetris really well. You learn to love the smell of pine wood, and you learn to avoid open screws at any turn. This is a 2017 ProMaster, so it's new enough that having a regular breakdowns should not be an issue. However, I've had some quirky things happen that are a little ProMaster specific, and things that I thought was going to be a big deal and turned out to not be because of YouTube University. So I was at a campground in Salt Lake City, Utah, and everything was fine. I had been there for maybe 10 days, something like that. And I went to leave, and the van turned on and it drove about 3 feet and then shut off. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Turned it back on, I got it up, I took it down to a dealership. I was going to a dealership anyway to get my oil changed. By the way, people are like, oh, things cost so much at a dealership, you know, I would never bring it there. You can get a nice dealer coupon. Oil changes cost me less at the dealership than they do at private places, just by the way. Everything else may not be cheaper, but the oil change did. So I was going there to get an oil change. I was also going there to get recalls fixed, because that is an issue with ProMaster. There have been quite a few recalls. That didn't deter me from getting it, because every vehicle has recalls, so you'll just figure it out. So I was there for that purpose. When I went to the dealership, they did an oil change. They said, okay, we're gonna replace this belt. I said, great. They said, you'll be here 3 hours. Perfect. 9 hours later, they had to replace my radiator, because while they were fixing the recall, they broke my radiator. split it down the middle. And so they had to replace it for me. And I was like, okay. But they didn't tell me that. I just waited the 9 hours. And once they tried to give me my keys, they were like, here are your keys. Okay, thanks, bye. And I was like, wait. Are you going to explain why it's taken 9 hours? And they're like, oh, there's a thing with the radiator. Don't worry, it didn't cost anything. Bye. And so then I left the dealership and then I went to a different parking lot to go get something to eat, and I turned off the van and the van didn't turn itself on again. Figured out that there was an issue with a fuse on the battery. It wasn't something the dealership did. It was just a random quirk of ProMaster, and thanks to YouTube, I walked 2 miles to get a fuse from AutoZone and replaced it in the van, and was able to leave the next day without having to get anything towed. But it's a really hidden fuse, so email me, friends. if anyone out there with a ProMaster needs a fuse, it's a specific one, email me. But that was probably the biggest mechanical issue with the van that I've had. Your costs with van life, just general like maintaining and things, can be pretty fixed. What is flexible is gas. So it's a matter of what state you're in and how much gas is. And gas here right now is very expensive. And then it's about how quickly you really want to travel. So the slower you travel, the less you spend. Say that number one. It's just a matter of whether you finance your van or you didn't. I financed my van, so I do have a monthly payment, but I don't have a rent or mortgage payment. So it still costs less, and what I'm spending covers a house and a car. And then when it comes to, it's just about feeding myself. So if I'm camping or if I'm in a city, I spend the same amount of money. It's just a matter of whether I feel like eating out or not. So there isn't really like a set dollar amount that I can give. It fluctuates each month, but it definitely costs me less to live in a van than it does to live in an apartment and have a car and commute and do all of those things. It's really about what your personal budget is, really and truly, because like I really like to cook and I really like to eat. So I could easily spend, let's say $300 a month on food. Is that more than I would spend if I were in a house? Probably not. Could I spend less? Yes. Yes. As a single person, I could easily go each week and spend $50 a week at the most, and that be it. So there's just a lot of flexibility in that. You have to really compare it to what your sticks and bricks, as we say in van life, what that life is like versus what your on the road life is like. They shouldn't be so different unless your goal is to live lavishly, and that's why you got into a van. Some people choose to live in a van to save money. Most people choose to live in a van for freedom. Money's a factor, but it's not always the main thing. So it can be as expensive or as cheap as you really want it to be. Where your focus has to be is how much am I willing to spend on my home. Well, I'd love for people to come and follow me on Instagram at rolling_resilience. That's where you can follow me on my van journey. You can click on the link in the bio and read my origin story. And if you're interested in anything entertainment and lifestyle, you can reach me on Instagram at Claudia MB Consulting and on my website at www.claudiambconsulting.com.
Hey, it's Alexis again.
And Christian from Tiny House Expedition. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
And to watch the full tour of the DIY tiny home you just learned about, click over here. And don't forget to visit tinyhousebuild.com for building how-tos and advice.